Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, participant of the first meeting of the Preparatory Committee for the 2026 NPT Review Conference. I would like to formally welcome you to the side event organized by the European Union and UNIDIR on the perspective on the Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone. I'm Chen Zak Kane. I am the head of the Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone project at UNIDIR. And being at the NPT PrepCom, the topic of the Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone, as you well know, always has been and maintained a strong connection to the NPT Review Conference cycle. The Middle East resolution was an important element in the package to indefinitely extend the Non-proliferation treaty in 1995, and unfortunately the zone issue has in the past been a topic of lengthy and sometimes heated discussion, and at time was also the reason that consensus was not attained. The work of the conference on the establishment of Middle East nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction may change this perceived dynamic. The zone issue has been less contentious at the 10th Review Conference and could instead be a positive factor contributing to building a better atmosphere at the NPT Review Conference. We at UNIDIR hope that this will continue to be the case and wish you success in the work of the PrepCom ahead. As for our event, I'm very pleased to present to you all the Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction project phase 1 output, and please feel free to pick some of our publications, and also the opportunity to share with you the objective that we are planning for phase 2 as well as the activities. As you're well aware, the project presented numerous challenges and involved navigating really intricate political landscapes. We understood from the beginning that it would be impossible to please everyone and all the stakeholders, given the diverse interests and perspective involved on this topic. However, the EU political backing and financial generosity of the project allowed us to execute the project in a balanced and what we believe also a comprehensive way, taking into account the various viewpoints at play. I want to extend our gratitude to the EU for their support and willingness to take the risk, as well as their foresight in recognizing the potential of supporting such a complex project. This experience has been highly rewarding, and we believe it contributes to the zone objective, as well as better future for the region. In an era where there are many competing objectives and interests, I think on behalf of everyone from the Middle East, we really want to thank the EU for allowing us to do this project. And with that, I will give the floor first to Ambassador Marjolijn van Deelen, the EU Special Envoy for Non-proliferation and Disarmament, who has been an ardent supporter of UNIDIR, the Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone in general, and our project in particular. Following that, I will provide a very brief overview about the project implementation, what we achieved, what our findings, what the impact was, and speak a little bit about our project ahead. And then I will give the floor to our very distinguished speakers and panelists. First, virtually will join us Ambassador Jean Marad, the acting permanent representative at the Permanent Mission of Lebanon to the UN in New York. Ambassador Marad is also serves as the president of the Conference on the Establishment of the Middle East Zone Free of Nuclear Weapons and Other Weapons of Mass Destruction. And we are very fortunate to have her here today with us. And then I will turn to the speakers here in the room. First, Ambassador Bassem Hassan, the Minister Plenipotentiary and the Director of Disarmament and Peaceful Uses of Nuclear Energy and Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. And then to Ambassador Adam Scheinman, a Special Representative of the President of Nuclear Non-proliferation from the US. So with that, Marjolijn, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chen, and a warm welcome to everyone. It's great to see such a big crowd. I hope you had a chance to grab a sandwich, and I hope there were enough. But very welcome to this event. It's great that there's such good interest. I'll just say a few words about the EU position on the project and on the Weapons of Mass Destruction Free Zone in the Middle East. Because as you will well know, the EU is a long-standing supporter of WMD-free zones in general, and our commitment to such a zone in the Middle East, freely arrived at by all states, is well known. We have promoted it for a long time, well aware of the sensitivities and security issues involved. The EU's long-standing commitment to disarmament and non-proliferation aligns with this initiative, contributing to global peace and security. The EU supports the creation of WMD-free zones also as a means to strengthen key international treaties, such as the NPT, the Biological and the Chemical Weapon Conventions, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, as well as other instruments such as the Hague Code of Conduct, etc. We continue to encourage all states to join these instruments and fully implement their obligations and commitments under these. This is fully in line with the EU's commitment to a rules-based international order. Even today, organized by UNIDIR, is within a project in support of a WMD-free zone in the Middle East, funded by the EU, implemented by UNIDIR. We've just decided to continue to support a phase 2 of the project, and this decision was agreed unanimously by all EU foreign ministers on 26th of June last month this year. And this joint decision by our foreign ministers shows that the commitment of the EU to a WMD-free zone in the region remains unchanged and strong. I would emphasize that point. It also reflects the reality that security in the Middle East and in Europe are closely interlinked. WMD proliferation in the Middle East remains a significant concern for the EU. Establishing a Middle East weapon of mass destruction-free zone is a crucial step and a tool towards promoting regional stability, peace, and security. And such a zone should include not only nuclear, of course, but also other weapons of mass destruction and their delivery systems, and take into account the security interest of all countries. By promoting the Middle East WMD-free zone and addressing WMD proliferation, the EU aims to support regional and multilateral efforts to reduce tensions and minimize the risk of armed conflicts in the region. The EU firmly believes in the effectiveness of multilateralism and diplomatic dialogue in addressing security challenges, as can be seen in our key role within the JCPOA, for example. Constructive engagement and cooperation among regional states are essential for successfully establishing a Middle East WMD-free zone. Contributions by civil society and academia are also very important and can further build the necessary confidence towards the establishment of the zone. The EU recognizes that achieving the goals of the WMD-free zone requires a long-term commitment, and it's a complex undertaking, hence the importance of this initiative and the EU's previous commitment and upcoming 3-year commitment for another 3 years, so in total 6 years of work by UNIDIR. You'll hear about the achievements in the first phase and as well as the plans for the new project. This new project will continue with the bridge building and dialogue and capacity building, and it will expand on a more in-depth understanding of the relationship between the Middle East WMD-free zone and current regional and international developments. So I want to stress that there's been and will be a strong emphasis on regional buy-in throughout the project cycles, from the activities to the findings. We want this to be an inclusive project, and it's very important for the EU. And in our view, it's the only way forward in this process, the inclusivity. Activities throughout the project, the events, the publications, dialogues, provide a unique opportunity for enhanced confidence building and cooperation among Middle Eastern states. I encourage all relevant actors to engage and contribute to enhancing and deepening the process. So finally, a big thank you to UNIDIR for taking this project forward, for a very good implementation, I believe, of the first phase. I wish you all the best for the implementation of phase 2. And just to know that it's always a pleasure to cooperate with UNIDIR. We do also have other projects, but Chen, thank you as project leader for this one on this particular effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marjolijn. I want to just mention that one of the few positive aspects of COVID was the fact that we were able to do things online and attract audience that cannot travel or participate in the formal event. So we do have an online audience, and I want to welcome them. And we will, when we are taking questions, we will take them both from the audience online as well as in the room. So I just wanted to make sure and the event is recorded and will be posted online. So just for your information. So with that, I will move to the project itself, and let me introduce what we did manage to do in phase one and what we hope to achieve in phase two. The first phase of the project that took place between September 2019 and July 2023. So we actually implemented it within 4 years just because of COVID, had 4 overall objectives. The first one is to fill research gaps. The second one is to build analytical capacity in the region and encourage and support new ways of thinking about the zone. Obviously, it's not a new topic. We have been covering it at least from 1974. So the idea is really to collect some new thinking about how to go forward. The fourth one is, to collect the develop new proposal, and the fourth is the foster inclusive dialogue. The project was also particularly unique because of the fact that we had in the team itself Arabs, Israelis, and Iranians. So all main regional players have been represented in the research or in the team itself. And that was really important also to develop the buy-in from the region. The other part is the existence of a reference group, which really important and senior people from the regions, as well as from extra-regional countries that have been supportive very actively the project and gave us advice about different activities as well as product, which was also helpful with the regional buy-in. The publications that we managed to produce, and as again, there are many that you can take here, we published 15 different policy papers. Many of them were translated to the 3 main regional languages, Arabic, Hebrew, and Farsi. And the idea again was to create bigger audience of people from the region that are able to engage, to read it in their own language in order to be able to engage in the program, but also in the process itself and the initiative of the zone beyond our project specifically. We have also 2 online tools, the timeline as well as the online the depository. In the document depositories, we have over 450 different documents that we collected about the entire history about the zone, both positions of countries, as well as reports that were produced by the IEA, by the UN General Assembly, and many others. And I will encourage all of you to visit there. In the timelines, we have over 150 key events in the history of the zone. And of course, it's being linked to both the documents as well, the original documents, as well as videos at times when they were available. And again, the idea was to create an interactive tools for diplomats as well as experts. So when they are engaged in this topic, they will have the full breadth of the history as well as what's going on right now. And we continue to update those tools as developments happening on the ground. Moving to the events that we organize, we held about 23 different events. Maybe counterintuitively, we started from national workshop as opposed to regional workshop. And again, trying to achieve the buy-in from the region, we actually started with workshops in Egypt, then moved to Iran and Israel that we needed to do online because of COVID, and then in the Gulf. And there we partner with regional or local organizations. And again, the idea is to create this partnership, the long-term partnership in the region and with countries in the region, and by this, and explain them what we're trying to do. At the beginning, there was a lot of suspicious about the project. They were thinking that we're trying to undermine the official process. So it was really the idea was to create the buy-in. And then after we did, I think, particularly good job in trying to convince them that we're not trying to compete with anything, but trying to help, we moved to more regional workshops. The regional workshop covered everything possible that related to the zone, nuclear verification, nuclear cooperation on research and energy, lessons from the JCPOA, chemical and biological weapons, means of delivery, etc., etc. We also partner with different international organizations besides of the regional organization that I mentioned already. And we had about 1,700 participants from 132 different countries. And you can see the breakout here. We mostly had official and ex-official, but also experts and international or regional organization. And I think trying to achieve this balance between the officials that are dealing with this topic on a day-to-day basis, but also the experts from the region that can help us with the thinking and supporting the process from outside was important. This is just showing who participated from the region. You can see that Egypt was the most represented in our events. I don't think very surprisingly, following by Iran and Israel, and then several other countries that also were represented. And I think, as you can see, some of the countries that played an important role in the conference itself before they assumed presidency, you see sort of a little bit spike in their participation, which again, I think important in the sense of informing the process as it happens right now. This is just how many countries or how many users have been using our online tools. And I think, again, now almost if you're searching for NPT resolution of 1995, you probably will be directed by Google to our tools. So that's obviously draw more users in our online tools. The key project takeaways, and here I want just to mention, this is takeaways rather than conclusions or recommendations. They were based slowly on the outcome of the project activities. This is what we heard from people from the region. This is what we heard from people, both experts as well as diplomats. There were also part of an idea of, and you will see they are prescriptive, they are descriptive rather than prescriptive, sorry. And they're designed really to capture the diverse views and opinions that we heard. We identify three takeaways. The first one are factors that affecting progress. The second one is lesson learned from past processes and current process, and the role of sustained and focused dialogue. So when you read the final report that is available here, you will be able to dive in, and if you have any questions, I will be very happy to speak on each of those aspects, how they influence the process, how they influenced in the past, and how they are currently influencing it as well. So I will not get into it, but I will be very happy to speak about more on each one of those in the Q&A. Each of our publication also adds specific finding and recommendations. So as opposed to takeaways that are more reflective of a broad consensus or broad opinions, this is more specific, and it's based on the authors itself, although of course it went through a very strong peer review. Each of the publication have specific findings as well as recommendations. We summarize those in the final event, so you're more than, if anyone wants to read them, they can read them both in a very short version, in like half a page, or if you want obviously to read the entire publication, we have that available as well. Another example of how we try to make it digestible for people that just want to get the gist of things. Going to the impact, what we managed to achieve, I think we did manage in many ways to get regional buy-in and active cooperation from all countries in the region. We did receive requests for capacity building and provided that when was possible. We informed the research and policy making by diplomat, expert, and student, at least by testimonies that we received by them. We have been providing support when asked for drafting reports, as well as summarizing state positions and help bridge positions when being asked to do that, and integrated really fresh voices and topics and ideas. So with regard to the fresh voices, we had an entire publication about integrating women in the process and more voices related to young people, as well as scientists. And then we also contributed to over 57 external events that people came and asked us to participate in. Moving to the new phase, when we started the first one, 2019, anyone that follow up what's happened in the Middle East today is not the Middle East of 2019. There are many developments, some of them are very positive and some of them are more worrying. What we wanted to do is really to account to those developments in the new project. And we came up with objectives that we really spoke with many countries in the region to try to come up and account to their perspective, as well as how we can promote the zone idea. And the overall objective is to promote weapon of mass destruction, non-proliferation, arms control, and disarmament norms and objective in the region by supporting the zone initiative, as well as other related regional security processes through policy relevant research, capacity building, and obviously dialogue. We identify 4 main kinds of activities that we want to pursue. The first is to identify and assist regional countries in mitigating regional weapon of mass destruction proliferation trends, that addressing the more worrying aspects of proliferation in the region. The second one is to encourage regional security arrangement and arms control, non-proliferation and disarmament, again, norm and processes. The third one is to develop the in-depth understanding the relationship between regional security and other processes that are happening right now in the region and the Middle East weapon of mass destruction free zone, and how they can help each other to promote really both the zone as well as other regional security processes. And then overall to promote an effective, verifiable, inclusive, and sustainable Middle East weapon of mass destruction free zone. We identify 3 ways to do it, 3 what we call work streams. The first one into deeper understanding of an appreciation in the region and beyond that, because in the region itself, we are not going to build the zone by itself. It's going to be also with help from outside players, both international organizations as well as extra-regional countries, about the causes, motivation, and risk associated with regional weapon of mass destruction proliferation, and identify the trend and solution to those. The second work stream is to build the regional capacity to enhance understanding of the problems and ability to identify the solution related to the zone. And then the third one is, again, is really to support, and that's the main objective, support an effective, verifiable, inclusive, and sustainable Middle East weapon of mass destruction free zone. I think that's my last slide. Yeah, so we'll go back now to our very distinguished panelists. The first speaker will be Ambassador Marad.
Thank you for UNIDIR, the European Union, for organizing this side event and for inviting me to be on board as a panelist in my capacity as the president of the 3rd session of the conference on Middle East Free Zone. So I will try to be short. A lot of work has been done since I took over in November 2022, the work of the 3rd session of the conference. I would like at the beginning just quickly to remind that the first presidency of the conference was led by Jordan, second by Kuwait, and Lebanon. We took over the 3rd session. In the first session, the Jordan presidency put the first stone with a political declaration. This political declaration, we consider it to be the framework of the conference. It's the first TOR of the conference. Let's put it like that. And the second session of the conference under the presidency of distinguished PR of Kuwait, our colleague Tarek, managed to adopt what we call the rules of procedure of the conference, as well to establish the intersessional meeting entity known as working committee between 2 sessions. So this is a quick overview for the past 2 sessions until Lebanon took over for the 3rd session of this conference. So the 3rd session of the conference has marked the beginning of a transition in the work of the conference from a general exchange of views to more in-depth discussion on the key building blocks of the treaty. The focus and the agenda on obligations and terminology, which was a proposal by the president and endorsed by the states, enabled the conference to refine the language and elaborate further on the future treaty's core obligations, especially negative prohibitions. Elaborating these obligations is a crucial first step towards the implementation of the conference mandate, as it is the basis for any consideration of verification requirements, cooperation arrangements, institutional arrangements, or the protocols for the zone itself. The discussion on terminologies is no less important as it enables the interpretation of and provides a legal framework for the implementation of obligations and all other considerations that will stem from them. As such, the relationship between obligations and their definitions are in lockstep and share a symbiotic relationship. It is for this reason that they were the two main topics of thematic discussion during the third session, and later on, definitely, as well during the work of the working committee meetings. Recognizing the limited time available during the annual sessions of the conference for the discussion needed to arrive or to attain the required familiarity and ripeness, if I may say, of positions, the second session of the conference, as we mentioned it at the beginning, adopted a decision to create a working committee, which has a mandate to continue deliberations intersessionally and on informal basis on issues related to the mandate of the conference and on the basis of the outcomes of each session. Now, as for the type of work that the working committee has undertaken, its main working method so far has been to invite external experts from academia and think tanks to brief on specific topics where the states have felt they needed more information. For its current intersessional period, now we concluded the work of the intersessional period 1 week ago. So the working committee, as mandated by the third session, we continued deliberations on the two thematic agenda items, namely glossary of terminologies and the general principles and obligations for the Middle East Zone Free. And now I would like to give a briefing about the outcome of the working committee for this session. So under the presidency of Lebanon, the working committee of the Middle East Free Zone Conference third session wrapped up its work successfully. Lengthy yet tough negotiations produced a sound outcome document, encapsulating deliberations, interactions, and exchanges, as well as salient points raised by participating invited experts in their respective presentations during working committee meetings. Furthermore, the summary outcome document went beyond previous iterations in past sessions, which were strictly procedural, to include factual, descriptive, and substantive elements to a certain extent. It will firmly set the conference on the pathway towards normative discussion on the future legal instrument establishing the Middle East nuclear weapon free zone. Through my presidency of the conference and its subsidiary body, I took stock of numerous aspects worth to be highlighted and emphasized to help mature the process and its working modalities for the future sessions. First and foremost, the importance of the conference resides in the fact that it is the only forum at present where a cooperative approach to regional security in the Middle East is being discussed, with the participation and support of the vast majority of Middle East states. Beyond the mandate of the conference, it is a forum which acts as a confidence-building measure and a capacity-building opportunity for many delegations. The conference is also the first substantive negotiation platform on the issue since the adoption of the first resolution of the establishment of nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East 5 decades ago in 1974, and has achieved so far more in its 3 annual sessions than all previous initiatives. In sum, I would say, before tackling the way forward that I would like to share with the House, and it is my own reading and perspective throughout my presidency, before going through the way forward, in conclusion, I would like to say that the third session of the conference has produced two main documents, and very important document in terms of setting the pathway for the future and the next session. The first one is the conference report itself, which was discussed until very late night hours, 3 a.m. We concluded the work on the conference report to make sure that some what we call red zones or taboo topics that were exported from one session to another were tackled somehow, or at least we had the gut to put them on the table during the session and to start thinking about the approach and the way how to tackle them and from which angle we can discuss them. And this was one of the breakthroughs that this conference has made. Now, the second document was, as I mentioned, the summary outcome, the shared summary outcome document of the working committee, which was, I would say, more than factual, less than substantial, but rather substantively descriptive. And I would consider it to be the presidency signature, the Lebanese presidency signature, in setting the pathway towards normative discussion on the future legal instrument to establish a Middle East nuclear weapon and mass destruction weapon-free zone. Now, regarding the way forward, or what we call the follow-up actions for the next session. Institutionalizing closer cooperation between outgoing and incoming presidencies would contribute positively to forward planning and enhance continuity. And this is what we're going to do, hopefully, with the future presidency, Libya, according to the alphabetical order. We already started the cooperation or the collaboration of the handing over, not only the ceremonial handing over, but at least to make sure that what was achieved during this session in terms of terminologies and glossary, and the first attempt to be on the path of normative exercise would be resumed as well with the next presidency. Although I would say the contours of a treaty are starting to take form, there is still a need for all states to share their positions on several key aspects in order to be able to reach a common understanding on these matters, which will set important parameters for the negotiations ahead. To this end, there is a need for national experts from different governmental agencies and capital to engage with the conference proceedings to help transition the process from an exchange of views to negotiations on elements of the future treaty. Now, regarding the absentee states, and namely Israel, given the absence of Israel from the conference process, there is an understandable reluctance to push ahead too quickly or too far with agreements on the contents of the treaty, unfortunately. As important as it is to continue to balance between progress on the mandate of the conference and the desire to keep the door open for Israel to join, it is also important to keep in mind there has been plenty of skepticism about the chances of success for the process, particularly because of the absence of Israel. The progress and the momentum the conference has been able to generate so far has played an instrumental role in reversing some of this skepticism. Now, I would like to conclude with a positive note, if I may, Madam Chairperson. From my position and in my capacity as president, before the start and the kicking off of the work, the conference, I made sure to conduct very intensive bilaterals with the 5 permanent member states, because they are observers in this conference meetings, and I prompt them and I urge each one of them to be present and to come in person to express their concern, their view, their opinion, to bring their fear, and that this platform is open with no judgmental attitude. We were able to, at least under this presidency, under the presidency of Lebanon, to convince the House that the PR representative would not only attend the conference, the general meeting of the conference, general debate, but as well, I insisted on having them on board during the work of the working committee, and they were very much active. Unfortunately, the US was not present there, but the four other permanent representatives were present. We opened as well the door to the experts of the agencies, the concerned agencies, including the IEA. And this helped a lot in making the discussion much more holistic, comprehensive, and participatory. So from this meeting, from this side event meeting, I would like to seize this opportunity in order to once again invite all member states, with no exception, to attend and to criticize from the House, from inside the meetings, to express all of their fears and to be confident that their concerns will be reflected, will be encapsulated, and will be well taken in the outcome document and in the discussion and in the interaction among member states, present member states. So I would like to thank you, and I keep myself at your hand for a Q&R. And through you, many thanks to UNIDIR and to the EU for funding the phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Merad, and thank you for your leadership in the last year and handing the presidency soon to Libya. With that, I have the honor to give the floor to Ambassador Bassem Hassan.
Thank you, Chen. I would also like to thank UNIDIR and the European Union for organizing this timely and important side event, and for the kind invitation to share a few thoughts on this important project. It's indeed a privilege to be on this very distinguished panel. And I also thank the audience, the large participation, and sacrificing your lunch for choosing to participate in this discussion. As you are well aware, this project was launched right before the adoption of the decision on convening the United Nations Conference on the WMD-Free Zone in the Middle East. And therefore, the project's outputs and activities, including throughout 26 events and 12 reports, could not have been more timely or relevant in terms of providing very pertinent and helpful insights to the participants at that conference. Through the rigorous work of Chen and the team in UNIDIR, the project's deliverables really helped to fill important research gaps and to provide very interesting tools on how the endeavors related to the establishment of the zone have evolved over time, addressing several core issues from the conceptual, technical, and political angles, including drawing on the lessons learned in the similar experiences of other regions. Moreover, the research on collecting different perspectives and new ideas on how to move the process forward was quite unique in terms of providing practitioners and insiders to the UN conference process, such as myself, with new and fresh insights. Needless to say, I don't fully agree with the conceptual foundation or the conclusions of every single study or paper that was conducted under the project. There were some cases when the underlying assumptions of the research was that the Middle East case is too unique to the extent that we need to entirely reinvent a new disarmament and arms control toolbox to establish a WMD-free zone in the region. But even in those few cases when the conceptual approach or the findings were not very compelling from my personal point of view, it was very helpful to see how certain aspects could be viewed differently. Most importantly, I think the project provided an additional platform for in-depth dialogue that brought together a diverse group of stakeholders, both from within and outside the region, including representatives from think tanks and the academia. And these in-depth discussions and the approach of unpacking the seemingly complex endeavor of establishing the zone into more manageable pieces have strengthened the conviction of many experts and practitioners that the agreed objective of establishing the zone is in fact quite attainable. This also facilitated a better understanding of the positions of the states in the region, fostering a more inclusive and collaborative environment for dialogue. It has been previously argued that the establishment of the zone is merely an aspiration that is almost impossible to materialize due to the fact that the scope is too broad, covering 3 categories of WMDs and their means of delivery. Yet, through the progressive deliberations of the UN conference and the research conducted under this project, this myth was largely dispelled. Not only through the process of the conference and the project, I think with the very pertinent presentation that was just delivered now by my dear friend, Ambassador Jean Mourad, who did a wonderful job in chairing the 3rd session, of course, that culminates the achievements of the previous sessions and the presidencies of Jordan and Kuwait. I think if you look at the actual deliberations of the conference and how they are evolving, how the discussions are now progressively moving towards the actual substance, this is a genuine effort. It's not politicized. It's really aiming at achieving a joint objective that has been agreed by consensus. The inputs and constructive engagement that we receive so far from the observers as well, not just among the countries of the region, the active participation of China, France, Russia, the UK, the other observer organizations, the IEA, OPCW, and the BWC ISU. It's really impressive, the kind of objective discussions that we have is really moving forward. I think this is an endeavor that is really worthy of every single possible support that we can get, both from the intellectual and political points of view. And again, I commend UNIDIR and the EU for this important contribution. We look forward to its continuation. And we think that in the next phase, there is a lot to be done to have more linkages between the research that is being conducted and the topics that are being discussed at the coming sessions of the conference. As Jean rightly mentioned, we are now starting the real work on the substance, the general obligations, the other provisions of the treaty, modalities for entry into force, and very interesting discussions on different perspectives. You would be sometimes amazed if you participate in those sessions. You would assume that since Israel is not in the room, that we are in agreement on everything. But as Jan rightly mentioned, sometimes we spend until 3 a.m. in the morning differences, and I'm not talking about differences between Arab group and Iran, for example, as some might expect, but even amongst the Arab group, there are different perspectives, different approaches, and I think all practitioners here in the room are quite used to that. The disarmament and arms control discussions have different approaches, different toolboxes, different perspectives on whether security comes first, confidence building, or disarmament. This nexus is always present in the room. Again, all this research and all the platforms that we can utilize to move gradually towards achieving that long-standing commitment is important. And I look forward for the discussions and the questions at the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bassem, and thank you for also the support for the project and the cooperation throughout the last 3-4 years of the project. With that, I will turn the floor to Ambassador Sharman.
Thank you very much, Chen. Thanks for bringing us together today, and certainly welcome the opportunity to share the podium with my colleagues and Ambassador Mourad on screen as well. Certainly very grateful to the EU and to UNIDIR to Chen and her team for their work on this project and the opportunity, as I said, to speak. I've known Chen for years, maybe going back about 20 years or so now, and I think all of my colleagues in the U.S. have been very impressed with her skill, scholarship, and analysis. So we know this project is in very good hands. The output that the team has generated over the initial 3-year period is exceptional. I won't pretend that I've read everything or listened to every online meeting. I wish I had time for it, but I don't. But I do know that my colleagues who track these issues very closely in the US government are deeply familiar with the content. I'd also like to thank and applaud the EU for its decision to support UNIDIR's continued work on the project, and certainly quite interested to see the direction that this takes over the next 3 years. I'll say a bit about what we hope the project focuses on, maybe at the very tail end of my remarks, but first, given some of the remarks by my colleagues, I'd like to at least briefly provide a US perspective on current efforts underway to advance a Middle East WMD-Free Zone, including the UN conference that I have been so kindly invited to, or the US government has been so kindly invited to. First, it bears repeating that we have been clear, and it remains our position that we seek to work with all regional states to advance the goal of a WMD-free zone in the region, consistent with the 1995 resolution. That hasn't changed one bit. We also know that a zone in the Middle East is unlike all the others that have been established, the 5 other regional zones around the world. In the Middle East, you have a history of conflict, you have the lack of political recognition of Israel by many, most Arab governments. And given that, we have had the view that the only practical path to achieving a zone can be through cooperation and inclusive dialogue, and in the context of a comprehensive and durable peace in the region. It's certainly our perspective that one cannot separate disarmament from security. We've been consistent in our view that any process toward a zone must emanate from the region. It must be based on the consent of all states in the region and be in line with, I think, fairly well understood guidelines for such zones as they have appeared in UN documents. It's why the United States worked alongside other NPT depositaries in the 2010 to 2015 period to facilitate dialogue among all the regional states on arrangements and modalities, not just to simply hold a conference, but to hopefully generate a productive conference that could be attended by all regional states, and those states could agree on next steps. That, of course, would require direct negotiation among all parties in the region, and by necessity include a broad-based agenda to include regional security issues. And it was disagreement on this point, or these points, that led to the eventual collapse of the 2015 Review Conference, a result we very much regret. But the fact is, the draft final document included language assigning an arbitrary date for the Secretary General to convene a conference based on terms and modalities that the US and several others were not prepared to support, and Israel also made clear it too could not accept those terms. Unfortunately, there was no flexibility during the end of those negotiations, and we had a take it or leave it situation. Again, very much regret that that was the denouement to that particular conference. So then we have the UN resolution in 2018 to establish a conference, which in our view essentially took the decision that didn't pass in 2015 and imposed it on UN membership. It tasked the UN Secretary General to convene a conference and with terms and modalities that look very similar to the 2015 document. So I hope it is of little surprise that the US was no more prepared in 2018 to accept a position or decision that it wasn't prepared to endorse in 2015. So, of course, we have the circumstance that the US hasn't attended the first 3 sessions of the conference, and it remains our view that inclusion of all states and the arrangements, the principle that arrangements be freely arrived at mean more than simply inviting parties to a meeting, but allowing them to have a genuine stake in that process. Having a stake means inclusion of issues that all states in the region deem to be pertinent to achievement of a zone. I don't think we have reached that point yet. So sorry for the lengthy explanation, but I simply recounted to make clear that US efforts over the years were intended to avoid the precise situation in which states now find themselves, where we have a multilateral zone process. It's been launched, and one regional state is not in a position to join because its particular perspectives and concerns, including on geographic scope in terms of reference and so on and so on, simply weren't reflected. But more fundamentally, I think there remains just a basic difference of view that can't simply be papered over, and that deals with the relationship between achievement of a zone and political normalization in the region. Some view the work on a zone as the pathway to such normalization. Others view it in the entirely opposite direction. That's a dilemma that we can't resolve, and I don't think the UN conference underway can skirt it if it expects Israeli support. So some of that might seem like ancient history, but I know from the work of the project that the individuals and institutions working on these issues have long memories. While not present at the UN conference, the US does follow the discussions and developments with interest. And of course, we were prepared to take note of the fact that the process is underway in the 2022 draft final document. We've certainly encouraged governments in a position to do so, to engage with Israel directly and at appropriate levels to hopefully identify a mutually acceptable way forward on this issue. Certainly can reaffirm that the US will support any proposal or proposals that all states in the region can accept. So despite differences of view on the issue, we would still like to believe that most NPT states parties don't want to see the Middle East zone become an obstacle to consensus in the next NPT review cycle. We've of course had 2 straight review conferences where we've failed to secure consensus, and we ought to be working on ways to manage our differences and hopefully resolve them rather than allow them to get in the way of yet another consensus outcome. So I think I will stop there in the interest of time. Just one point on the look ahead, or do you want to address that in the Q&A? Okay.
Thank you. So as you can see, we did not solve all the problems in the Middle East, and we have another 3 years to try to do that, exactly that. So with looking ahead, I have a small question that I like to ask the panelists, but I will want to get questions from our audience. So if there are any, please raise your hand and I will give you the floor. So in the meantime, I see Sharon. Sharon, you will be first, but let me ask the question so our speakers will be able to think about it while Sharon and I asking the question. So the first question that I have is looking ahead, what you thought was the most effective or impactful contribution from phase 1, and again looking ahead, what do you think our priorities for phase 2 should look like, and where do you think would be the most impact and important aspect that you would like us to explore? With that, Sharon, I think you were the first one that wanted to ask a question.
Thank you so much. It was not just for this event, but all the publications have such an impact on the Middle East Treaty Organization work too. I think from even before we wrote the first draft, Chen, with your blueprint for the zone, I wanted to ask, what is it that the US has to lose from sending a delegate to a room that only supposed to achieve a text? That's it. Writing whatever is going on in this room, saying nothing, sending it to the Israelis. It has nothing to do with Israel's security after all. So this is one question. The second question I have, on the political declaration that came out from the first session of the UN conference on the zone, the first paragraph was about civil society participation. And yet civil society can only enter the room in the first hour and the last hour. And also in the intersessional work, civil society per se is not invited. How would you recommend us, civil society, to work closer and supply more ideas, be part of the process so we'll know what it is that we can do to help the process, especially because in civil society, we are not standing, in between. We are actually pro-disarmament. We are pro the zone. It's very obvious that we are pro the zone, but yet we are not giving the tools to assist the process. Thank you.
Thank you. I will start with Ambassador Murad if you want to address some of the questions that you heard.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. I would like as well to thank my dear colleague and friend Bassem. When we say the zone and Bassem, they go in tandem. And as well, Ambassador Sheinman, I'm so happy to see you on board. I would have wished as well to see the US in our meeting. So it's very relevant and pertinent what was said by your esteemed audience regarding what would prevent a member state to come to attend in a passive listening mode and maybe to be the mediator or to play. I would not invite the US to play at this stage maybe the interplay role, but at least to bring what is discussed in this room to the due consideration and attention of the absentee state Israel. This is one point. This was as well one of the arguments that I was using when I approached my colleague from the US mission here prior to the start of the conference work, asking them at least to be present in a passive listening mode. And regarding one observation that was raised by Ambassador Sheinman, that he's not very much sure that the concern of the absentee state would be taken into consideration and reflected in the document itself. I would like from this platform to assure him that other countries as well attending those meetings, they had equal concern and even much more than Israel. And they wanted to bring some thematics to the meeting which are considered or which were considered by other countries to be a taboo and red flags. I will give you an example. The unilateral coercive measures. It was like a dark box. This was like a Pandora box that no one wanted to open. And I gave the country who had concern regarding this subject matter, I gave her all the possibility and the latitude to bring this on the table. We discussed it openly with a lot of tension, mishmash, sometimes suspension of the meeting for hours, but at least this country had the chance to bring before the House its concern and what is the views regarding this subject matter. So no one is obstructed and no one is left behind. And this feeling of to be maybe disregarded or marginalized during the meetings. It's only something which is in the head of any country who decide to be absent. The best way in order to test the water is to jump in the water. And I would like to invite for next session, really, maybe to start with the following, because it's an evolving process. If Israel would think it's still premature for her to come and to assist and to participate and to attend, I would invite the US in a listening, passive mode, just to come, to sit there and to listen. Now, regarding the civil societies, under the presidency of Lebanon, we put it on the agenda, and I proposed that the civil society would be invited to the working committee meetings. There was, I would say, a kind of resistance. I would not say reluctance. I'm pretty much optimistic that in the next session, because we already matured the discussion on that, I hope that my successor, dear Ambassador Taher El-Sunni, the PR of Libya, will be able to make a certain breakthrough in this regard. Once again, it is an evolving process. Nothing can happen overnight, but we need to start talking about what we consider to be untalkable items. There's nothing that cannot be brought on the table and envisaged openly and in a frank manner. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Hassan.
Thank you, Chen. Let me start with your question on what was, to me, the most effective deliverable or outcome from that project. And in addition to those reports and studies that I referred to, I think I personally benefited a lot from the participation in the events, be it hybrid, online, or in person. But I think I really was impressed and moved by how the discussions at those events were really deep in substance, very related to what we're discussing at the conference itself, shedding some light on difficult issues that need to be tackled from different perspectives, and that was quite helpful. The active participation by a number of independent researchers and think tanks from across the region and beyond the region was also very helpful, and we encourage you to do that. Since I do have the floor on the point raised by my dear friend Sharon on the participation of civil society, it was very difficult even to secure that language on the participation of the civil society and NGOs. Believe me, I mean, even participation in the opening and closing session was quite a difficult task, but I do envy you for not being able to sit at the other closed session. You don't want to see how the sausage is made. Sometimes it's really painful to be there. But anyway, to be honest and fair, I think it is sometimes in the benefit of such intergovernmental processes to have some privacy for the governments to express their views on difficult topics, frankly, at least amongst themselves. Of course, at the end of the day, I think everyone somewhat knows what transpired more or less inside the room, but for the delegations to have this opportunity to express themselves, it's very important. And I really appreciate the effort conducted by the METO project as well. Quite impressive propositions on how the obligations of the treaty should look like, and we follow that very closely and benefit from it. Now, very briefly, because I had this gut feeling that the side event will be on the conference more than on the project. I listened very carefully to the panelists and everything, but again, I would like to very briefly reiterate that most of the participants in this conference never spared an opportunity to try to engage in direct dialogue with Israel. Be it on arms control and non-proliferation in general, or trying to convince them to participate in this conference. In particular, Egypt, for one, has conducted and is still continuing these contacts. We're trying our best. We tried also our best to make sure that the parameters of this process are completely identical to the UN guidelines of 1999. The words freely arrived at are in the mandate of the decision that established the conference. The uphill battle to have the rules of procedure basing everything on consent. I was personally firmly against having procedural decisions being adopted by consensus, because that's not how you have a productive and constructive, sustainable process. But nevertheless, based on the advice of many participants, including, by the way, observers, Russia played a key role in trying to advise us that this is the right way to go, to keep the door as open as possible and to stay as constructive as possible. And we followed that advice, particularly for that reason, while I think it is somewhat dangerous to have all procedural decisions by consensus. So again, we are open to ideas, to engagement. We think that it's very important to realize that the relation between security and disarmament, if we have learned anything from history, they are not mutually exclusive. We have to work on both tracks. Security and disarmament are not competing with each other. I will leave it there and back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Well, just briefly, again, appreciate the appeal for U.S. participation. We hear you, and obviously we will continue to listen. I think, though, the issue is less the absence of one state than it is a process which, in our view, doesn't seem to be structured in a way that can lead to an outcome and a process that meets the interests of all states parties. I mean, I certainly appreciate Bassem's very articulate point on disarmament and security, of course, being interdependent. But I think what we have is a process in the UN system that is designed to deal with the disarmament machinery piece and not the security piece in the region. And I think that can only come through direct engagement and dialogue among those states in the region. It's not the absence of the US from the process that creates the problem any more than Israel's absence. I think it's the assumption that as I said, the disarmament piece can move forward absent progress on the security track. And frankly, we're dealing with a region that is no less peaceful today than it was in 1995. Actually, in 1995, we had the prospects of a Middle East peace process that, of course, led to the Acres opportunity that didn't succeed in the end, but it reflects the close connection between regional peace building efforts as well as in the relationship to disarmament efforts. And I just don't believe those can ever be pulled apart. We have nothing to lose by participating or not participating in the conference. We simply will welcome the progress that is made as the process goes along. We'll continue to pay attention. We'll look forward to consulting with some of the states parties or the members of the countries that are attending the conference and do our best to keep up. The real benefit, I think, of this project that's underway is the grassroots work that is being done to help build the intellectual foundations for achieving a zone. And I think that is apparent in all the many reports and workshops that have been completed. It's essential analysis that needs to be done at the front end. And most importantly, it's being done not just among Arab states or Israeli states, the Israeli state, or even Iran. It's being done by everybody, and that engagement is really critical. And I think if we do have, with some luck, if it's possible to achieve a WMD-free zone in the Middle East in the future, I have no doubt that the groundwork that's been laid will play a big part in that. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, we have 3 more questions from the audience online, and I do not want to neglect them. So please, my colleague will ask them, and then I will ask each one of you to answer briefly for the questions to address them. So please.
Thank you, Han, and distinguished panelists for your presentations. The first question is from Ambassador Nabila Al-Mura, who is asking the EU Special Representative and our other panelists whether the concerns around delivery systems are fully entrenched in the scheme for Middle East WMD-Free Zone, and are there any lessons learned from the JCPOA in this regard? Another question we received is directed at Hen and goes as follows. Could you kindly shed some light on how this UNIDIR project will be beneficial on a global scale? Lastly, we have a question about whether the panel can elaborate on their perspectives on the impact and value of the Abraham Accords as a driver and a platform for more substantive discussions on regional security arrangements, including ultimately a Middle East WMD-free zone. Back to you, Han.
Thank you. Ambassador Murad, do you want to pick up a question to answer?
Maybe I would like, Madam Chairperson, because I didn't have the chance to have my comment regarding the project. I would like first, if I may, to say the following. As the first session of the conference and launch of UNIDIR project happened in the same year, the UNIDIR project acted as a sort of multiplier in terms of awareness raising around the conference and the Middle East zone issue in general. And it succeeded in creating a platform for dialogue among different stakeholders and in different circles beyond the diplomatic community, such as academics, civil society, and other experts, which had dwindled in the years following the 2015 NPT Review Conference, unfortunately, where the Middle East issue was unfairly blamed for the failure to adopt the final document. But for the way forward and going forward, I would encourage in the phase 2, the project in its phase 2 to facilitate close engagement with and among regional officials on the zone and related matters through intensifying their outreach and seeing their convening power to promote, or suing their convening power to promote this regular engagement. This will have a positive effect on the conference as well, as it has now started to transition towards elaborating the elements for the future treaty, which will require more input from officials in capitals. So this was my final remark, and I would like to thank you so much. Thank your audience and your speakers. And as well, among you, I have my colleague Bashir Azam as well, who is present from the mission of Lebanon in Vienna. And through him, I would like to convey the readiness of Lebanon as president and in our national capacity, always to work toward security and stability in the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Hassan?
I think the question regarding the impact of the Abraham Accords was rightly and brilliantly captured through the research of UNIDIR and the publications. I think it was referred to as one of the developments that could be seen as an enabler for better chances for cooperation and dialogue in the region. But of course, the same studies also rightly try to keep track of certain other developments that can be challenging for discussions on security and disarmament altogether. I wouldn't make a final judgment on that, whether this is a decisive factor or not, but of course I do agree that it's one of the developments that might make the atmosphere in the conference room easier, and outside the conference room as well. I'm not sure whether there was another question or not, but again, on the question related to security versus disarmament, if you look at the political declaration that was endorsed at the first session, multiple references to security issues. If you look at the outcomes of the second and third sessions in the reports, the discussions there are definitely not restricted to pure disarmament and non-proliferation issues. So actually, the agenda and the scope of the discussions is decided by the participants themselves. Everything is there, and actually, even without Israel participating, I think the discussions have touched upon a number of security and political issues. Any other questions that I might address? Thank you.
Adam, do you?
Yeah, just very quickly, on the question of the Abraham Accords and some of the related activities underway, I very much agree with Bassem that such arrangements can help facilitate maybe and provide a track record of cooperation and coordination on security issues. So I think there's quite a bit of promise there, but I also think it will take time for those arrangements and habits of cooperation to mature. So I don't think we should have very high hopes. The last point is just, in terms of the project and taking it forward, in our view, in our sense of the Middle East zone, just as we look to the, I guess, the global analog of elimination of nuclear weapons from the planet, we just see massive complexity in terms of the verification requirements, in terms of the enforcement mechanisms that would be required, legal arrangements that would need to be in place, and just the basic confidence and trust among parties to take a process forward, given the history of the region. The work that UNIDIR can do to try to chip away at some of those grand and global challenges, I think, is very much welcome. And I suspect that, again, in the end, the work you do will, it may be an indicator of success or failure in achieving a regional zone. So thank you.
Okay, with that, I will answer just briefly that with regard to the global scale, obviously what happened in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. When there are negative things, there might be opportunity or risk for spillover that we want to prevent, but also there is the opportunity, because in the international level there is such an animosity right now, to actually try on a regional level to address some of the problems that we have. And I think there is a situation in which we cannot rely on others to save us, but also cannot blame others of our failures if we don't take the responsibility of our own future. So my hope is really, with the new phase of the project, is to empower people from the region to continue and take the responsibility of their own future. So with that, I will thank you for staying with us. Thank you for staying with us longer. And I hope to continue to cooperate with you in promoting regional security and the Middle East weapon of mass destruction free zone. Thank you.